A nurse was hired to care for a child in a vegetative state. Then one day, when no one was looking, she approached the child, and something terribly unexpected happened, leaving her completely terrified and speechless. Imagine the unbearable pain of seeing your child, a kid full of life and dreams, trapped in a vegetative state, unable to move, speak, or smile. Meet Sarah, the dedicated nurse who enters Tommy's life, bringing not only medical care but a fierce determination to change his fate. It was an autumn morning when Sarah arrived at the Miller mansion. Leaves were gently falling from the trees, creating a golden carpet along the stone path leading to the imposing residence. Sarah adjusted her bag on her shoulder and took a deep breath, trying to contain her nervousness. It was her first day as Tommy's private nurse, a boy in a vegetative state. She knew she had a tremendous responsibility. The mansion door opened before Sarah could even ring the bell. A middle-aged man with meticulously combed gray hair and an elegant posture greeted her with a warm smile. "You must be Sarah. I'm John Miller." "Welcome," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. It's a pleasure to meet you," Sarah replied, shaking his hand. "Please call me John," he said, guiding her inside. "Let me show you where you'll be working." Sarah followed John through the spacious entrance hall, adorned with artwork and antique furniture. The house reflected the seriousness of the responsibility she was taking on. They passed several doors before reaching a large, well-lit room where Tommy lay in a bed, surrounded by medical equipment. "This is Tommy," John said, his voice softer. "He's 10 years old and has been in a vegetative state for 6 months since the accident." Sarah approached the bed and looked at the boy. He seemed so fragile and small among all those machines. She felt a wave of compassion and determination. "I'll do my best to take care of him," Sarah said firmly. "I know you will," John replied. "My wife, Melissa, is eager to meet you too. She should be around here somewhere." As if on cue, a tall woman with wavy brown hair and a serious expression entered the room. There was something cold and distant about her demeanor. "You must be Sarah," Melissa said without smiling. "I hope you're ready for this challenge." "Yes, I am," Sarah replied, trying to keep her composure. "I'm here to do whatever it takes to help Tommy." "Great," Melissa said briefly. "Let's see how you do." John watched the interaction with a concerned look but said nothing. He stepped forward and lightly touched Melissa's arm. "Honey, let's give Sarah a chance. She came highly recommended," John said, trying to ease the tension. "I know, John. I just want to make sure we're doing the best for Tommy," Melissa replied with a sigh. Sarah began organizing her equipment and checking Tommy's medications. As she worked, she tried to ignore the feeling of being closely watched. She knew she needed to earn the family's trust, but it would take time. "If you need anything, I'll be in the office," John said before leaving the room. Melissa stayed a few moments longer, watching Sarah with critical eyes. Finally, without saying another word, she turned and left the room, leaving Sarah alone with Tommy. "Let's get started, kiddo," Sarah murmured more to herself than to Tommy. "Let's see what we can do for you." She began adjusting Tommy's position in the bed and checking every detail of the equipment, monitoring his vital signs. As she did, she felt a wave of responsibility and determination. She knew this would be a challenging job, but she was ready to face whatever came. The morning passed quickly as Sarah familiarized herself with Tommy's routine. As time went on, she began to feel more comfortable in the new environment. Even without the ability to respond, she felt that Tommy knew she was there, caring for him. At the end of the day, John returned to the room to check how things were going. "How was the first day?" he asked with a gentle smile. "It went well. I'm starting to get used to everything," Sarah replied. "I'm glad to hear that. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call me," John said. "Thank you, John. I'll do my best to ensure Tommy receives the best possible care," Sarah promised. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, determined to continue her work with Tommy. She arrived at the Miller mansion before dawn, greeted by the porter who let her in without question. As she walked through the still silent hallways, she reflected on the previous day and the tension she had felt between John and Melissa. Entering Tommy's room, Sarah began the routine of checking the equipment and adjusting the medications. Tommy looked so fragile and small amidst the machines that monitored every aspect of his life. She approached and gently stroked the boy's hand, feeling a growing connection. "Good morning, Tommy. Let's see what the day has in store for us," she murmured as she adjusted the pillows around the boy. While she worked, Sarah heard footsteps in the hallway. She looked towards the door and saw Melissa enter, her expression rigid and watchful. Melissa carried a tray with a bottle of medication and a glass of water. "Good morning, Sarah. How is Tommy today?" Melissa asked without much emotion. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller. Tommy seems stable today," Sarah replied, maintaining her composure. Melissa nodded, placing the tray on a nearby table. "I appreciate your dedication. It's important that we maintain his care meticulously. Of course, I'm here to ensure Tommy gets the best care possible," Sarah said sincerely. Melissa's expression softened just a little. "Thank you, Sarah. Let's hope for a good day." With that, Melissa left the room, leaving Sarah once again alone with Tommy. Sarah took a deep breath and continued her work, determined to make a difference in Tommy's life. "Good morning, Melissa. He is stable. I was just adjusting the equipment and checking the medications," Sarah replied, trying to sound confident. Melissa nodded and placed the tray on a nearby table. "This is the new medication the doctor prescribed. I hope it helps," she said, handing the bottle to Sarah. Sarah took the bottle and carefully read the label. "I'll add this to Tommy's records." "Thank you," she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. Melissa stood still for a moment, watching Sarah's every move. The tension was palpable. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer. "I know I might seem tough, Sarah, but it's only because I care so much about Tommy. He means everything to us," Melissa said, her eyes finally showing a bit of vulnerability. "I understand, Melissa. I'll do my best to take care of him." "You can count on me," Sarah replied, trying to establish a connection. Melissa nodded and left the room, leaving Sarah alone with Tommy again. Sarah began to log the new medication into Tommy's records but couldn't shake the feeling of distrust towards Melissa. Something felt off. Throughout the day, Sarah continued her routine, always watching Tommy closely. During a break, she stepped outside to get some fresh air in the mansion's garden. The place was beautiful, with colorful flowers and majestic trees, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. While in the garden, John approached her with a welcoming smile. "Sarah, how's everything going? Are you adjusting well?" he asked with a genuine tone of concern. "I'm adjusting, yes. Tommy is stable and I'm starting to understand his routine better," Sarah replied, trying to sound optimistic. John nodded, looking relieved. "I'm glad to hear that. If you need anything, please let me know. We want the best for Tommy." "Thank you, John. I'll make sure he gets the best possible care," Sarah promised. Back in Tommy's room, Sarah continued her constant watch. She noticed that the boy seemed calmer that day. Perhaps it was the new medication, or maybe he was getting used to her presence. At the end of the day, Melissa returned to check on Tommy. She observed Sarah with a critical eye but said nothing. Sarah continued her work, determined to prove her worth. "If you need anything, I'll be in the living room," Melissa said before leaving the room. Sarah watched the woman leave. Inside, she knew earning Melissa's trust would be a challenge, but she was ready to face it. She looked at Tommy and smiled. Let's keep going, Tommy. One day at a time, she said more to herself than to him. Sarah spent the rest of the day organizing the medications and ensuring everything was in order. On the third morning of work, Sarah arrived even earlier, determined to observe any changes in Tommy. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light across the mansion's garden. As she entered Tommy's room, Sarah noticed he seemed more peaceful. She adjusted the equipment and prepared for the daily routine. "Good morning, Tommy," she murmured as she adjusted the pillows and checked his vital signs. While she worked, Sarah heard light footsteps in the hallway. The door opened, and John entered with a worried expression. "Good morning, Sarah. How is he today?" John asked, approaching the bed. "Good morning, John. He's stable, but something tells me we need to watch him closely," Sarah replied, not taking her eyes off Tommy. John nodded, looking relieved. "I'm glad you're attentive. It gives me a bit more peace," he said, running his hand through Tommy's hair. At that moment, Sarah noticed something. Tommy's finger seemed to move slightly. She leaned closer, watching intently. The finger moved again, this time more noticeably. "John, look at this," Sarah said almost in a whisper. John looked at his son's finger, and his eyes widened. He moved," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Tommy, if you can hear me, move your finger again," Sarah requested, hope in her voice. There was a moment of silence, followed by another slight movement of Tommy's finger. Sarah and John exchanged incredulous looks. "This is amazing," John said, smiling for the first time in days. "We need to tell Melissa." Sarah hesitated. "John, I think it's better if we wait a bit longer. I want to observe more signs before we raise any false hopes." John pondered for a moment, then agreed. "You're right. Let's wait and see how he progresses." During the rest of the morning, Sarah kept a constant watch over Tommy, waiting for any further movement. Each time Tommy's finger twitched, it was as if a new hope sprang up within her. Shortly after lunch, Melissa entered the room with a tray of medications. "How is he?" Melissa asked, looking directly at Sarah. "He's stable," Sarah replied, trying to stay calm. "I've observed some subtle signs, but I'd prefer to wait before drawing any conclusions." Melissa looked at her son, expressionless, and then turned her attention to the medications. "I hope these signs are something positive," she said, handing the tray to Sarah. "I hope so too," Sarah murmured as she began to log the medications. At the end of the day, John returned to the room, looking more relaxed. "How was the rest of the day?" he asked. "Tommy showed some signs of movement, but it's still too early to say what it means," Sarah replied. "I understand. Thank you for being so attentive," John said, gratitude in his voice. As night fell, Sarah prepared to leave the mansion, but before she left, she approached Tommy and held his hand. "I will continue to take care of you, Tommy. Don't worry," she whispered, feeling a wave of determination. She left the room, leaving Tommy to rest. As she walked down the hallway, she couldn't help but think about all the things she still needed to figure out about Tommy's condition and the tension in the Miller household. That night, as she prepared for bed, Sarah reflected on the day. She knew there was more going on in that house, and that she needed to be alert to every detail. On her fourth day of work, Sarah woke up with a sense of unease. Something about Tommy's movements and the atmosphere in the Miller house made her uncomfortable. She arrived at the mansion determined to observe every detail, looking for any clues that might help her better understand Tommy's situation. "Good morning, Tommy," Sarah said as she entered the room, adjusting the pillows and checking the boy's vital signs. As she worked, she remembered Tommy's subtle finger movements from the previous day. She decided to try again. "Tommy, if you can hear me, move your finger," she asked in a gentle tone. To her surprise, Tommy's finger moved again. Sarah felt a chill down her spine. Something was definitely happening, and she needed to understand what it was. She leaned closer to Tommy, trying to establish communication. "Tommy, I know you're there. If you can give me another sign," Sarah said, her voice full of hope. Once again, Tommy's finger moved, but this time, his eyes also opened slightly. Tommy's gaze was filled with fear, and Sarah felt a pang in her heart. "It's okay, Tommy. I'm here to help you," she murmured. At that moment, Melissa entered the room. She looked at Sarah with suspicion and then at Tommy. "Any news?" Melissa asked, trying to hide her concern. "He moved again," Sarah replied cautiously. "But there's something more. He seems scared." Melissa frowned. "Scared? What are you talking about?" Sarah hesitated. "I'm not sure, but when I mentioned calling the family, he seemed frightened." Melissa looked at Tommy and then back at Sarah, her expression hardening. "You're imagining things. Tommy is in a vegetative state. Involuntary movements can happen." "I know, but I feel there's something more," Sarah insisted, trying to remain calm. Melissa shook her head. "Just do your job, Sarah. Leave the speculation to the doctors." With that, Melissa left the room, leaving Sarah alone with Tommy once again. Sarah knew something was wrong, but she also knew she had to be cautious. She continued to watch Tommy, looking for more signs. Each time he moved or opened his eyes, the fear in the boy's gaze made her even more concerned. During a break, Sarah decided to investigate the room more thoroughly. She began to search the cabinets and drawers, looking for anything out of the ordinary. In one of the drawers, she found an unlabeled medication bottle. "Where did this come from?" she murmured to herself, feeling the weight of suspicion growing. The door opened abruptly, and Melissa entered again, her expression filled with anxiety. "Sarah, did you touch the medications today? Did you notice anything different?" Melissa asked, looking directly at the bottle in Sarah's hand. Sarah instinctively hid the bottle behind her. "No, ma'am. No one told me about any changes in the medications," she replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. Melissa nodded, clearly distracted, and left as quickly as she had entered. Sarah stood there, holding the bottle, her mind racing. She knew she needed to find out more about this medication. Later that night, Sarah took advantage of a moment of calm to inspect the bottle more closely. There was no indication of its contents or origin, just a clear liquid visible through the glass. "This can't be a coincidence," she whispered to herself. "I need to find out what's going on." Determined to protect Tommy, Sarah made a silent vow. No matter what it took, she would uncover the truth and ensure the boy was safe. At the end of the day, when John returned to the room, Sarah decided not to mention the bottle she had found. She needed more information before raising any suspicions. "How was the day?" John asked with a tired smile. Tommy moved a few times. "I'll keep watching," Sarah replied, trying to sound confident. "That's a good sign. Keep up the great work you're doing," John said before leaving the room. Sarah looked at Tommy and whispered, "I'll find out what's happening here, Tommy. I promise I'll protect you." On the 5th day, Sarah arrived at the Miller mansion with renewed determination. The discovery of the unlabeled medication bottle and Tommy's signs of fear left her uneasy. She knew she needed to act cautiously but also with urgency. As she entered Tommy's room, she greeted the boy as usual. "Good morning, Tommy. Let's see how you're doing today," she said while adjusting the equipment. While she worked, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the suspicious bottle. She needed to find out its origin and contents. She decided that that day she would conduct a thorough inspection of Tommy's room and the surrounding areas. After checking the vital signs and administering the usual medications, Sarah began her investigation. She started with the cabinet, where she found several properly labeled medication bottles. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until she found a small bag hidden at the bottom of a drawer. Inside the bag, Sarah found several empty medication packages, all without labels. Her heart raced. Something was definitely wrong. Who was administering these medications to Tommy, and why? While examining the packages, the door opened abruptly. Melissa entered the room, her face filled with anxiety. "Sarah, did you find anything?" Melissa asked, her voice tense. Sarah quickly hid the bag behind her back. "No, ma'am. I was just checking the medications to make sure everything is in order," she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. Melissa looked at her with suspicion but said nothing more. "Just make sure Tommy gets the correct treatment. We can't take any risks," she said before leaving the room. As soon as Melissa left, Sarah took the hidden medication bag and slipped it into her uniform pocket. She needed to investigate further and find out what these medications really were. That afternoon, while John was busy in his office, Sarah took the opportunity to conduct a more detailed inspection of Tommy's room. She checked the drawers and cabinets, looking for anything out of the ordinary. In a small bag at the back of a cabinet, she found several empty packages of the same unlabeled medication she had discovered earlier. Sarah's heart raced. This couldn't be a coincidence. "I need to find out the truth," she murmured to herself. Suddenly, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, she hid the bag under her uniform. The door to the room opened again, and a woman entered like a whirlwind. It was someone Sarah didn't know. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, surprised. "I'm Claire, Tommy's biological mother," the woman replied with an urgent expression. "How is he?" "He's stable, but there's something you need to know," Sarah said, hesitating for a moment. "I found some unlabeled medications in his room." Claire turned pale. "That's impossible. I always check Tommy's medications. We need to find out what's going on here," Sarah said, determined. "You're right. Let's investigate this together." Later that night, while Tommy slept, Sarah and Claire met in Tommy's room to discuss what they had discovered. Claire seemed desperate to find a solution. "I knew something was wrong, but I never thought it was this serious," Claire said, tears in her eyes. "We'll get to the bottom of this," Sarah assured her. "We need to confront John and Melissa with what we know." As they planned the confrontation, Sarah felt a wave of determination. No matter what it took, she was willing to protect Tommy and uncover the truth. The next morning, Sarah and Claire were ready to confront John and Melissa. They knew the truth had to come out, and they were prepared for anything. "Let's go, Claire. Let's find out what's going on," Sarah said with a resolute expression. They headed to John's office, determined to get answers. "John, we need to talk to you," Sarah said as she entered the office with Claire right behind her. John looked up from his desk, surprised by the seriousness in their voices. "What happened? Is everything okay with Tommy?" "We found something concerning," said Claire, holding up the bag of unlabeled medications. "These bottles were hidden in Tommy's room. We don't know what they are or where they came from." John took one of the bottles and frowned. "I had no idea about this. Melissa, do you know anything about it?" he asked, looking at his wife, who had just entered the office. Melissa stopped at the door, her expression hardening. "Those medications are necessary for Tommy's treatment. I got them from a trusted doctor," Sarah interrupted, feeling the need to clarify the situation. "But there are no labels, and that's very suspicious. We need to know exactly what we're giving Tommy." Melissa huffed, crossing her arms. "You're overreacting. I only want what's best for Tommy." "We want the same thing," Claire said firmly. "But we need transparency." John looked from one to the other, feeling the tension rise. "We need a doctor who can clarify this for us. I'll call Dr. Peterson so he can explain these medications." With that decided, Sarah and Claire returned to Tommy's room, deciding to continue investigating while waiting for the doctor to arrive. Sarah remembered the diary she had found in the boys' drawer. "Claire, I found Tommy's diary. I think it might help us understand better what's going on," said Sarah, pulling the small notebook out of the drawer. Claire took the diary with trembling hands. Tommy always liked to write, even after the accident. The two began to read the pages of the diary, discovering a world of anguish and fear that Tommy had been living in. He described the constant fights between John and Melissa and how he felt caught in the middle of the conflict. "I just want everyone to stop fighting over me. It's like I have no voice," read one of the entries. "This is heartbreaking," murmured Sarah. "We need to do something." As they continued reading, they found an entry that mentioned the mysterious medications. "Today, Melissa brought new meds. They make me feel strange. I don't want to take them, but she insists," Tommy had written. "This confirms our suspicions," said Claire, closing the diary. "These medications might be worsening Tommy's condition." Suddenly, they heard hurried footsteps in the hallway. Dr. Peterson entered the room, accompanied by John and Melissa. "I got your call, John. What's going on?" asked the doctor, looking around. Sarah stepped forward, holding the medication bottle. "We found these bottles in Tommy's room, but we don't know what they are." Dr. Peterson took one of the bottles and frowned. "These are not medications I prescribed. We need to analyze them immediately." Melissa turned pale. I thought I was doing the right thing." John looked at Melissa, disappointment clear on his face. "Why didn't you tell us about these medications?" "I just wanted to help Tommy," Melissa said, her voice choked with emotion. "I was desperate." Dr. Peterson left the room to take the medications for analysis, leaving the family in tense silence. "We'll get through this," Claire said, placing a hand on John's shoulder. "We need to stay united for Tommy." Sarah watched the scene, feeling a mix of relief and determination. She knew there was still much to uncover, but at least they were on the right path. "We'll keep taking care of Tommy," Sarah said, more to herself than to the others. "He needs us now more than ever." The next day began with a tense atmosphere in the Miller mansion. The analysis of the mysterious medications was underway, and everyone anxiously awaited the results. Sarah was determined to keep a close watch over Tommy, while Claire tried to find ways to cope with the situation. In the morning, as Sarah adjusted Tommy's equipment, John entered the room with a serious expression. "Dr. Peterson is back. He has the results," John said, his voice tense. Sarah nodded and followed John to the living room, where the doctor awaited with an envelope in hand. Melissa and Claire were already there, sitting in silence. "Good morning, everyone," Dr. Peterson began, pulling the papers out of the envelope. "I have the results of the analysis of the medications you found." Everyone held their breath as the doctor continued. The bottles contained a mixture of medications not prescribed for Tommy. These medications could have caused severe adverse reactions, including the worsening of his vegetative state, Dr. Peterson explained, looking directly at Melissa. "Melissa, what do you have to say about this?" John asked, his voice choked with anger and frustration. Melissa was visibly shaken. I just wanted to help Tommy. A friend told me these medications could make a difference. I was desperate. But you shouldn't have made that decision alone," Claire said, her voice filled with emotion. "Tommy is my son. We should have discussed this together." Dr. Peterson intervened. "Let's focus on ensuring Tommy gets the appropriate treatment from now on. We need to stop using these medications immediately and monitor his condition closely." John looked at Sarah. "Sarah, You've been incredible in caring for Tommy. Can we count on you to make sure he gets the right care?" "Of course, John. I'll do everything I can," Sarah replied, determined. The rest of the day was filled with the task of reorganizing Tommy's care plan. Sarah worked tirelessly alongside Dr. Peterson to ensure every detail was correct. Meanwhile, Claire and John tried to understand how Melissa had reached this point. The tension was palpable, but there was a shared determination to overcome the crisis. That night, Sarah sat by Tommy's bed, holding his hand. "We'll get through this, Tommy. I promise I'll protect you," she whispered. As if in response, Tommy's finger moved again, this time with more strength. Sarah felt a wave of hope. Perhaps with the right care, he could improve. In the days that followed, Sarah maintained her constant vigilance. She watched every sign from Tommy, recording each movement and reaction. John and Claire were always nearby, offering support and taking turns beside their son. One afternoon, as Sarah adjusted Tommy's medications, John entered the room, looking calmer than he had in recent days. "Sarah, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done. I don't know what we would do without you," John said, gratitude evident in his voice. "I'm here to help. I want the best for Tommy," Sarah replied with a smile. "I know that, and that's why I wanted to ask you something," John said, hesitating for a moment. "Could you stay with Tommy tonight? Claire and I are exhausted and need some rest." "Of course, John. I'm happy to help," Sarah said, accepting the responsibility. That night, while the house was quiet, Sarah sat by Tommy's bedside, staying alert. She knew the road ahead would be long, but she was determined to do her best for Tommy. Around midnight, Sarah heard a noise in the hallway. She got up and went to the door, finding Melissa standing there with a troubled expression. "Melissa, what are you doing here?" Sarah asked, trying to stay calm. I can't sleep. I just wanted to see Tommy," Melissa said, her eyes full of tears. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but then opened the door. "You can see him, but let's talk," she said. Melissa entered the room and approached Tommy's bed. "I'm so sorry, Tommy. I just wanted to help you," she murmured, caressing her son's hand. Sarah watched the scene, feeling a mix of compassion and distrust. "Melissa, we need to work together for Tommy's sake. We can't make decisions in isolation." "I know, Sarah. I know. I just want him to get better," Melissa said, sobbing. "We all do," Sarah said firmly. "Let's make sure he gets the best care possible. Together." Melissa nodded, and the two women stood there in silence beside Tommy. The revelation about the unmarked medications had shaken everyone, and the trust between John, Claire, and Melissa was fragile. Sarah knew she needed to be a mediator and ensure that Tommy received the right care. Sarah began the day as usual, checking Tommy's vital signs and adjusting his medications. She noticed that Tommy seemed a bit more responsive, perhaps a sign that they were on the right track. As she worked, she heard a heated conversation in the hallway. John and Melissa were arguing, their voices echoing through the house. "Melissa, how could you do this without consulting us? Tommy is our son. It's not a decision you can make alone." John's voice was full of frustration. "I know, John. I was desperate. I just wanted him to get better," Melissa responded, her voice choked with tears. Sarah knew she needed to intervene. She left Tommy's room and went to the couple, trying to calm the situation. "John, Melissa, we need to stay calm. We all want what's best for Tommy, but we need to work together," Sarah said firmly but gently. John took a deep breath, trying to control himself. "You're right, Sarah. We need to resolve this together." Melissa wiped away her tears. "I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry, Sarah. I just didn't know what else to do." "We'll find a way together," said Sarah, looking at both of them. Let's focus on ensuring Tommy gets the right care. Later that day, as Sarah continued her work, she found Claire in Tommy's room. Claire looked worried, holding her son's diary. "Sarah, there's something else you need to see," Claire said, handing the diary to Sarah. Sarah opened the diary and read the pages Claire pointed out. Tommy had written about a specific medication Melissa insisted he take, even when he didn't want to. "This is serious, Claire. We need to talk to Dr. Peterson about this," Sarah said, determined. That afternoon, Dr. Peterson returned to the mansion for a new evaluation of Tommy. Sarah and Claire took the opportunity to show him the new information from the diary. "This confirms our suspicions," said Dr. Peterson after reading the diary. "These medications might have contributed to Tommy's decline. We'll adjust the treatment and monitor him closely." Melissa, who was present during the conversation, looked devastated. "I just wanted to help," she repeated. "We know you wanted the best for Tommy," Sarah said, trying to console Melissa. "But we need to ensure he gets the right care from now on." In the days that followed, the situation began to improve. With the new treatment plan, Tommy started showing signs of recovery. He moved his fingers more frequently and at times seemed to try to open his eyes. One night, while Sarah was on duty, Tommy did something surprising. His eyes opened fully, and he looked directly at her. "Tommy, can you hear me?" Sarah asked, emotional. Tommy tried to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he squeezed Sarah's hand tightly. "It's okay, Tommy. We're here for you," Sarah said, tears of joy streaming down her face. She called for John, Claire, and Melissa, who rushed into the room. Everyone was emotional to see Tommy so responsive. "My son, I'm so happy," Claire said, holding Tommy's hand. "We'll keep working together to make sure Tommy fully recovers," John said with determination. Melissa, still shaken, looked at Tommy with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Tommy. I just wanted the best for you." With everyone united, the atmosphere in the mansion began to change. There was new hope in the air, a shared determination to ensure Tommy received the best possible care. In the days that followed, Tommy continued to show signs of recovery. He still had a long road ahead, but with Sarah's dedication, Dr. Peterson's guidance, and the support of his family, he had a real chance of getting better. Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction in her work. She knew she had found an important purpose there. As she looked at Tommy, she promised herself she would do everything in her power to ensure he made a full recovery. "We'll make it, Tommy. Together, we'll make it," she whispered, feeling a new wave of determination. In the following days, Tommy's condition began to improve visibly. Every small progress, like moving his fingers or opening his eyes, was celebrated by everyone in the house. Sarah was determined to ensure Tommy continued progressing and was always alert to any sign of change. One morning, while Sarah was adjusting Tommy's medications, Dr. Peterson arrived for a new evaluation. He brought good news. "Sarah, I've been observing Tommy's improvements, and I believe we're on the right track. I want to adjust the medications to further optimize his recovery," Dr. Peterson said with an encouraging smile. "That's wonderful, Dr. Peterson. What do you suggest?" Sarah asked, hopeful. "I want to introduce a new physical therapy protocol, in addition to adjusting the dosage of his current medications. This should help further stimulate Tommy's neurological response," the doctor explained. Sarah noted Dr. Peterson's instructions and began implementing the changes immediately. As she worked, Claire entered the room, looking more relaxed than in recent days. "How is he today?" Claire asked, approaching her son's bed. "Tommy is making incredible progress. Dr. Peterson suggested some changes that should help even more," Sarah replied with a smile. Claire held Tommy's hand and, for the first time in a long time, genuinely smiled. "Thank you, Sarah. You've been an angel to our family." "I'm happy to help, Claire. Tommy is a fighter. We'll make it," Sarah said confidently. Later that day, John and Melissa met with Sarah and Dr. Peterson to discuss the new treatment plan. Everyone was determined to do their best for Tommy, and their collaboration began to strengthen mutual trust. "Dr. Peterson, we're willing to do whatever it takes to help Tommy recover," John said firmly. "I'm glad to hear that, John. Your cooperation is crucial to the success of the treatment," the doctor replied. Melissa, though still visibly shaken, was also committed. "I want to correct my mistakes and do the best for Tommy. I'm ready to help in any way possible. Let's work together to ensure Tommy receives the best care possible," Sarah said, encouraging the group's unity. With the new treatment protocol, Tommy began responding even more. The physical therapy proved effective, and he started moving not just his fingers but also his arms and legs in small gestures. Each progress was a victory for everyone. One night, while Sarah was on duty, Tommy made a surprising move. He opened his eyes and tried to speak. "Tommy, can you hear me? Try to speak," Sarah said, emotional. Tommy made a great effort and murmured, "Mom." Sarah rushed to call Claire, John, and Melissa. When they arrived in the room, they saw Tommy looking at them with eyes full of life. "Mom, Dad," he said with effort but clearly. Claire fell to her knees beside the bed, tears of joy streaming down her face. "My son, I'm here. We're all here." John and Melissa were also emotional. "You're doing so well, Tommy. We're so proud of you," said John, holding his son's hand. Melissa, her eyes filled with tears, whispered, "I'm sorry for everything, Tommy. I just want you to get better." With Tommy showing more significant signs of recovery, the atmosphere in the mansion changed completely. There was hope, determination, and a new sense of unity among everyone. In the days that followed, Tommy's progress continued. He started talking more, moving more, and even showing signs of wanting to stand up. Sarah, alongside Dr. Peterson, monitored each step with care and dedication. One afternoon, while Sarah was helping Tommy with physical therapy, he looked at her and smiled. "Thank you, Sarah. You've helped me a lot." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Tommy. You're a fighter, and we're all here for you." Tommy nodded with a determined look. "I want to get better. I want to be well." "You will, Tommy. We're all here to make sure of that," said Sarah with conviction. In the days and weeks that followed, Tommy's recovery continued to astonish everyone. He made daily progress, moving more easily, speaking more clearly, and his strength seemed to increase every day. The Miller Mansion, once a place of tension and uncertainty, now resonated with hope and joy. One morning, Sarah was helping Tommy with his physical therapy when he sat up on his own for the first time. "Look, Sarah, I did it!" exclaimed Tommy with a radiant smile. "That's amazing, Tommy. I'm so proud of you," Sarah responded, tears in her eyes. She knew how much that moment meant. Claire, who had been watching from the doorway, rushed to hug her son. "My love, you're doing so well. I'm so happy." John and Melissa soon joined the celebration, all moved by Tommy's progress. The family was more united than ever, with a newfound understanding of Tommy's strength and resilience. Dr. Peterson visited the mansion for a full evaluation of Tommy. He was impressed with the boy's progress. "Tommy, you are an example of strength and determination. I'm very proud of you," said the doctor, smiling. "Thank you, Dr. Peterson, and thank you all," Tommy said, looking at his family and Sarah. "I couldn't have done it without you." Over time, Tommy began participating in activities that once seemed impossible. He started walking with crutches and eventually managed to walk on his own. Each small step was a major victory, celebrated enthusiastically by everyone. One day, while playing in the garden with his mother, Tommy stopped and looked at Sarah. "Sarah, I want to thank you for never giving up on me. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself," Tommy said sincerely. Sarah knelt beside him and hugged him. "Tommy, you are an amazing boy. It was an honor to be by your side on this journey." As time went on, Tommy started attending school again and gradually regained his normal life. He made new friends and excelled in various activities, always with the constant support of his family and Sarah. Melissa, who had undergone a significant transformation, became an active advocate for patient safety and the importance of following proper medical treatments. She and Claire, who had initially been at odds, developed mutual respect and worked together to support Tommy. John, who had always been a constant support figure, dedicated himself even more to the family, ensuring everyone remained united and strong. The experience had changed them all, but it had also brought them closer in ways they never imagined. One afternoon, while the family was gathered in the garden, Sarah watched Tommy play with his friends. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the scene. "I never thought I would see this day," said John, smiling with satisfaction. "It was a long road, but every moment was worth it," Claire replied, holding John's hand. Melissa nodded, looking at Tommy with pride. "He's our miracle." Sarah smiled, feeling grateful to be part of this journey. Tommy taught us what true strength and resilience are. As the sun disappeared on the horizon, the family gathered for a group hug. It was a new beginning, full of hope and possibilities. And so, the Miller Mansion, once a place of pain and uncertainty, became a symbol of love, strength, and renewal. Tommy, with his unwavering determination, showed everyone that with support and perseverance, any challenge can be overcome.